Hi, it's Julia Ray, and this is A Deeper Look. I believe the most important stories are the ones deep within us. The stories that make us feel alone, yet connect us when we're brave enough to tell them. Tune in every Wednesday to dive into the deep end together. Hello, everyone, and welcome to A Deeper Look. I'm Julia Ray, and I'm so grateful that you're here listening on this podcast journey that I'm beginning. I'm so excited that today I'm joined by one of my dearest friends, Bridget Riley. Thank you so much for being here, Bridge.
My pleasure.
Bridget, we take a deeper look at each other's lives almost daily. We chat on the phone. So I figured what better person to introduce this podcast with than you.
Well, I am excited to be here. I'm excited for people to take a deeper look at you. Like you just said, I have that opportunity on the regular. But for those of the listeners who don't know you as well as me, why don't you tell them a little bit about yourself and introduce you and why we're here?
All right. Well, I am a singer. I'm a songwriter. I'm an actor. And I am a patient advocate. I was diagnosed with cystic fibrosis before I was born. And so I grew up always knowing life with a chronic illness, which came with its own battles and ups and downs. And my mom likes to say that I sang my first words. I also grew up knowing I always wanted to perform. And growing up with that, those two truths was a really interesting journey, wanting to sing and be on stage, and also growing up in and out of the hospital don't always go hand in hand. And it's led to some trials and triumphs. And I wanted to start this podcast because I wanted to give people the chance to hear the stories that make us feel alone, but connect us when we're brave enough to tell them. And that is the tagline of A Deeper Look, and it's why I'm here and why I hope you all continue to listen.
Well, I know I'm personally excited. You and I text each other links, videos, interviews all day long, and you are already booking some of those personalities and speakers and bringing them on to take a deeper look. So elaborate a little bit on the title, some of the things you're hoping to uncover about yourself or some of your guests coming up.
Yeah, this title came to me a few years ago for a number of reasons. I think when you grow up with a chronic illness like cystic fibrosis, which is often referred to as an invisible disease, you grow up hoping that people take a deeper look at you and understanding perhaps what's going on behind closed doors. Because even when I was hospitalized with a collapsed lung, let's say when I was little, people would be like, but you look so healthy, right? We all make these assumptions about others constantly in our daily lives. And I want to be a constant reminder that we should always take a deeper look. Beyond that, I did go through a traumatic experience 4 years ago now when I got a villain edit on reality TV, and I wasn't expecting that edit. We can talk about that a little bit later, but it nearly broke me. And I don't say that lightly. I came up with this podcast idea 3 years ago after that experience, but I wasn't ready to talk about it. But I am today, and that's why we're here.
All right, I'm excited to get to that, but real quick before we move on, for anyone who isn't familiar with cystic fibrosis, why don't you share a little bit about what that disease is and how it manifests in yourself?
Yeah, it is a rare disease. So while some people learned about it in like 9th grade biology, I think there's a paragraph in biology textbooks about CF. It is a chronic lung disease, progressive lung disease. And it affects really the whole body, though. And it's not the cutest disease, as I liked to say when I was little, because it involves your mucous membranes. And it causes thick, sticky mucus in your lungs, in your digestive system. And that can lead to chronic lung infection, which would then cause hospitalizations and partial lung collapses. And growing up, I did have an average lifespan that I was aware of. When I was born, it was around 20 years old. And so I grew up thinking that I wouldn't be here, honestly, at this point. But incredibly, science advanced kind of as I aged. And in 2017, a miracle medication became available. Still makes me emotional to this day. And I have a new lease on life. I now view my future as limitless as I always hoped it would be. And I'm able to chase my dreams now in a different way because my not only, quantity of life has changed, right? My lifespan is, that of, I think, what I look at as a normal person, right? No one's tomorrow is guaranteed. But my quality of life has been turned upside down. I mean, I feel good. I can breathe easy. And that's something I couldn't have said before this medication.
It's easy for me to see you get emotional and get emotional while you talk about this miracle medicine. I met you shortly before you started it, if I'm not mistaken, and you were the first person I knew with CF. And it's been miraculous to have a front row seat and seeing how it's affected you, like you said, physically, but also just knowing your lifespan, seeing it increase tangibly and quality of life increase tangibly. Something you are known for and are very proud of is being an advocate for the CF community. Talk a little bit more about your work in the CF community, your background, and then how that's parlayed into some hopes and dreams you have as an advocate.
Yeah, I grew up actually hiding the fact that I had cystic fibrosis because I knew that having CF and having the big dreams I had for myself as a performer did not go hand in hand. So I didn't want, I grew up auditioning for musical theater productions, and I didn't want any directors to discount my abilities or pity me, really. That's something that I really wanted to avoid as well. And so I hid CF. In fact, I lied on some health release forms for some of the productions I was in and said I was totally healthy and absolutely did not have an illness. I don't recommend that, but that was just mentally where I was on my own personal journey with CF. And it wasn't until I was 16 that I was presented with an opportunity to use my voice on a grander scale. I had entered Miss Pennsylvania Teen really as another opportunity to perform because there was a talent portion in the pageant. And if anyone said, you can sing on stage, I said, yes, please. And I ended up winning that first pageant that I entered, and I needed a service platform. And I thought I would have done a disservice to the cystic fibrosis community if I had this bigger platform and didn't use it. So I decided to sing at the top of my lungs for CF, which then I turned into an official 501c3 nonprofit organization. And I really learned the power of sharing my story then. That was when that became evident to me. I'll never forget the first speech I made at a cystic fibrosis gala. It was in Philadelphia. I had my little crown on as Miss Pennsylvania Teen, and I talked about my own personal experience as a 16-year-old living with CF. And at that event was a mom with her daughter, Grace, and her daughter was only 5 years old. And Donna came up to me, the mother, and said, "Thank you for sharing your story. You give me so much hope for my own daughter." And as hard as it was to share my own story that first time, hearing those words from Donna solidified for me that I was never going to stop sharing my own story. Because if I could help just one mom and one daughter, that was worth my own sharing. My own vulnerability was worth it then. And, I've stayed in touch with Donna and Grace, and I've watched Grace grow up, which has been so magnificent, kind of just to be a bystander. And I'll never forget that moment with them. That was really a pivotal moment in my life because I did decide to devote much of my time to CF advocacy.
That's wonderful. I think it's wildly impressive and a huge reason you and I did become friends. And so much of what I admire about you is how you view the responsibility of your platform, even in the face of your chronic illness, and how you've pivoted from thinking it was something you should hide to something you share on a very public forum any chance you get. So that leads us into a public forum that you had the opportunity and hopes and aspirations to shed light on the CF community and your personal experience. Are you ready to talk about that?
Yes. I'm already getting so emotional that I'm like, buckle up, because this is going to be the first time I'm sharing this. This is the first time I'm going to be talking about this on my terms. And it feels really good, but I do think that it might be a bit emotional as we journey down this course.
Well, much like our daily deeper looks, we'll laugh, we'll cry, we'll talk about it. All right, so walk us back as far as you can and share the details of how this opportunity came to place and how you ended up on a reality television show.
Yeah, I think I'll even walk back a little bit further to say that when I was 17, this is how passionate I was about making it in the music industry. I made a homemade music video when I was 17 and posted it on YouTube and this is when YouTube was very new. So do the math. I am 31. So it was a long time ago, but I caught the attention of a producer in Hollywood, and they called my mom and I, because I was a minor, and asked me to move out to Hollywood and sign a record contract with them. And I did that so optimistically, and unfortunately was just devastated when my lungs collapsed partially as soon as I moved to LA. And so here I was on the way to pursuing my dream, and just so excited to be doing that. And then my lung disease got in the way. And I think that's important background, because at the moment that Listen to Your Heart was presented to me, this was my past. And I think when you grow up with a dream like I did, of wanting so desperately to break through a very difficult industry that, chews you up and spits you out every chance it can, and is just wrought with rejection. Anytime you get an opportunity, you think it might be your big break. And I remember very vividly when Listen to Your Heart casting came along and asked me to audition. I was single at the time, which was a necessity for the show because it's a dating show. And you needed to be a singer. It was an opportunity to sing on national TV. I thought this was my big break. And I so excitedly signed up. I mean, I'm sure you remember, Bridget. I was just like over the moon. I think you and I went out for drinks after my callback, one of my callbacks in New York City. And I think we both shared in the optimistic, maybe naivete of how incredible this experience might be for me.
I remember us sitting in Brother Jimmy's, shout out, and thinking about the serendipity that you were single, which you weren't always single. You were dating in New York at the time. You were single. It was a television show based around singing. It really seemed as if it was custom written opportunity for you at this exact stage of your life, where you were in your career, where you were with your health. To your point, the last time you had moved out to LA, you were in a different place. So it really just felt like the universe handing it to you on a silver platter. We were so excited.
It did. And I couldn't be told otherwise. I mean, I do remember my brothers, who never wanted me to go on a Bachelor show, were like, be careful. And I was like, oh, don't rain on my parade. I couldn't be told that it would go anything other than fabulously well for me, which of course probably set me up to fall even harder when, spoiler alert, it did not go well for me.
This is true. All right. So we've walked up to getting this opportunity. It is the perfect marriage. You pack your bags, you head out to filming. Walk us through a little bit about your experience and what that was like.
Yeah. Initially, and this was probably one of my biggest downfalls, I viewed producers as like my friends. I do live my life with a very open and trusting heart. And I certainly went into this experience with that trust and not having a better bird's eye view of what perhaps was motivating them, right? Their job is to make a television show, not to be Julia Ray's best friend.
That's my job.
And yeah, so I think that looking back was my biggest mistake in all of this, because when you arrive, you're very isolated. They take your phone away from you. You have no communication with the outside world. So I don't have my mom and my best friends to bounce things off of or tell them about what happened that day. So you're completely isolated. You know, because this was a new show, it was a very short filming time. So this may shock some people that watch the show, but I was actually only filming for 10 days. That's the only time that I was there with the cast. The only other time that I was there in addition to that was the 3 days in the hotel beforehand, the hotel room beforehand, which is kind of this time where they're really trying to isolate you. Like, that is what that's meant to do, because you can't leave the hotel room at all because your fellow castmates are in the same hotel. You can't meet them until you get to the mansion. And I mean, I could go on and on about what it was like in as far as production wise goes, and I think that will come up in this conversation anyway. But one of the most important things to me about this experience was publicly sharing my cystic fibrosis journey on this level and on a national stage. And in fact, I wrote a handwritten note to myself in the limo as I was arriving at the mansion that said, do this for the little girls like you know, and don't be afraid to do your breathing treatments on camera. And I did my breathing treatments on camera. And I think probably the most heartbreaking part of this experience was the missed opportunity there, was that wasn't shared. And that was out of my control. And I think I mistakenly thought this was in my control, and it so wasn't.
I think as your friend and knowing you, I'm going to fill in some gaps here. I think CF and being an advocate of CF is such a large part of your identity. And you went on that show thinking that was your leading quality, and you presented it to them. You didn't hide it. You didn't leave it off the forms like you did when you were little. You led with it. You said, this is who I am. This is what it looks like. Here's how it presents in my daily life. And then for them to omit that, they omitted a large part of who you are, which was the beginning of an edit, as you said, that didn't quite represent who you were, and that tainted your experience. Do you want to talk a little bit more about what you thought you were presenting and how it was maybe misrepresented and the impact that had on you more than anything?
Yeah, I mean, I talked about my own personal CF journey in the interview rooms, in production, really often. In fact, part of what happened was I thought, you know, here I am sharing my stories, and the producers were sharing some of their own personal stories with me. And I was under the impression that we were connecting on this like beautiful human level. But really what was happening was this reality TV currency, right? It was a transaction that I didn't even know I was a part of. And in many ways, it was used against me in the long run to create a narrative that simply wasn't true, too. And that is something that I had to learn and come to terms with, that when I signed the contract, I gave them permission to create whatever story they wanted to create. And I've learned so much about why it's so important to own your own voice and own your own story. And you know, I just, looking back, would never do that again. I would never hand over that much power to someone again, because unfortunately they didn't share the true me, right? And how could they, right? The show is about what it's about. And but we're all much more dynamic than what a reality TV edit can show anyone to be. I mean, I think every cast member of mine is more dynamic than the version of them that showed up on that show, which I think is important to remember when you're watching. And then, you know, beyond the edit being deeply painful for me to witness and also just absolutely humiliating, the backlash was the hardest thing to survive. I just simply couldn't see a light at the end of the tunnel. And I was, again, deeply saddened that a community that I felt so deeply connected to and represented would perhaps be embarrassed that I was representing them.
I think, just like we were saying, it was a perfect storm when it was presented to you. We thought it checked all the boxes. It was truly the perfect storm on the back end. You came home feeling how about your journey on the show?
Yeah, I came home and my mom was like, "How did it go?" When she picked me up from the airport, I was like, "It was amazing." I was like, "It was so fun." I got to sing, and I got to sing on the radio in LA. I got to sing at these incredible venues, these celebrity judges. I mean, I was ecstatic. I was pinching myself about this opportunity. I made so many friends. I mean, when I look back, it's really, you have to call it Stockholm Syndrome, because I thought I had this incredible experience. And I remember I rushed up to New York to see you and Cassidy, like my best friends, to celebrate. Like, we were literally celebrating me wrapping the show. So it's actually just so clear how unclear it was to me what was about to come.
I would completely agree with that. We went out that night. We went out with some of your castmates, and everyone had nothing but positive stories. You were all very bonded and enjoyed each other, which, when watching this program, it didn't always appear that way on screen, but I saw you afterwards, so I saw otherwise. And you shared what a great experience it was. I was thrilled. I was excited for the show to come out. I watched it. But to your point, I think, yes, how you were presented, most disappointing thing was not sharing your CF journey and being that public figure and advocate for it. You're hoping to show kids at home doing your treatment is just a part of everyday life, and you can live this full, beautiful life while doing that. I think the next part was just the way people reacted to, as you said, this very small snippet. Trying to think of the right word. It was truly a snapshot, a curated snapshot. And the backlash you got and the impact that had at you. And then to culminate this perfect storm was that it was March 2020. And the world as we knew it, and your ability to go out and continue living your life and build on the momentum of singing, being a public figure, just kind of came to a screeching halt. So talk about the mental health impact and kind of how that avalanche cascaded.
Yeah, an avalanche is a great word to describe what happened to me in March and April of 2020. You know, the first episode aired, and the first episode went fairly well for me. I thought it was super representative of what happened at that time, and I thought I was in for the ride of a great time. You know, the producers had been telling me, honestly, that I would be the most loved contestant. That was actually so hard to wrap my head around, because after episode 2, it was very clear that even in the headlines that were being written about the show or press releases that were being written about the show, that I was the villain. And I use that word, you know, villain, because what do we call a villain? You know, I don't know. I think we're all villains and victors and heroes, and, you know, at every day of our lives, I think we wear those hats. But you know, given that it was March 2020 and I did have cystic fibrosis, I took isolation very seriously. So not only did this experience feel emotionally and mentally isolating, because I didn't know anyone else who was also a villain on reality TV at the time, but it was also physically isolating. I couldn't go anywhere. I couldn't hang out with my friends. I couldn't feel human connection because we were in a global pandemic. So it did feel like the world was crashing in on me. The online hatred and backlash was so severe. There is no other word to describe it other than it was filled with vitriol. I have never seen my illness weaponized against me until that time. I received DMs that said, "You deserve to have cystic fibrosis. I hope you die alone. I hope you die a slow, painful death. I hope you kill yourself. I hope you take a long walk off a short bridge." I mean, these were deep, dark messages coming at my personal Instagram. And it was a time when I was filled with the most shame. And I didn't see a light at the end of the tunnel. Honestly, I articulated this to you and my family at the time, but I fought for my life many times as a young girl fighting cystic fibrosis. And that felt easier than having my character assassinated on national television and having people form these judgments about me that were not based in truth or reality, ironically.
Reality television's mislabeled.
Yes, exactly.
I think that was really hard for those of us closest to you. In addition to it being hard to watch, it was hard because we couldn't relate. We couldn't empathize. We were able to look at it from our perspective and say, yeah, but you aren't that person, so why does it matter? Why do you care? Why do you care what a stranger says on the internet? For those of us who haven't been a public figure or on reality television with a less than favorable following, walk us through a little bit what that feels like when you receive that attack and when you can watch yourself on television and see such a distinct misrepresentation of who you are and what that feels like.
Think before Listen to Your Heart. I did know who I was. I was so self-assured. And all of a sudden, when you see a version of you portrayed on a television show and then have a large number of people tell you who you are, you actually start to question who you are. And that, I think, was the hardest part of healing for me, was saying, wait a second, even though this many people are telling me who I am, that isn't true. And it is a very dark place to be. I think I worry so much about people that are the subjects of online hatred because it is such a dark place to be in. And it is so isolating. You know, forget the global pandemic piece of my experience. That is one of the most isolating things, to receive online hatred, to receive a hateful comment. And it took a lot for me to put it into perspective and remember who I was and move forward with that in mind. And what I needed most was, of course, support from my family and friends, but also I needed to find somebody who had gone through something similar. That was what I was desperate for in that moment. And the person I found was Monica Lewinsky. And she has this incredible TED Talk that I played over and over and over again at that time. I highly recommend everyone listen to it. It's called The Price of Shame. And obviously, Monica Lewinsky went through a very public mistake. And it was a personal mistake on a public forum, which felt like something I could identify with. And I thought to myself, okay, if she survived that, I can survive this. And something she shares in that TED Talk, which I think is harrowing, is that research finds that humiliation is more intensely felt an emotion than either happiness or anger. So my personal shame manifesting in the darkest time of my life made sense to me all of a sudden.
I think lots of people can relate to that in a less specific way. I think everyone's had something that is shameful, whether it be something embarrassing that happened in second grade that still haunts them in the middle of the night, or something on a much grander scale like you, I want to quick pause and circle back to something you said that stands out to me. You comparing yourself to Monica Lewinsky. Yes, the shame factor's the same, but you said she made a personal mistake on a public platform. I would argue you didn't make a mistake. Talking about your experience, you went on a television show as someone who has been an entertainer their whole life. You performed as a singer. You dated because you were single. You didn't make a grand mistake, and yet you still feel this shame. I'd be curious to hear a little bit more about what you view your mistake as. And do you really feel like you made one, or do you feel like people made you feel like you made one?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think my mistake was believing the experience to be something that it simply was not. And also, I did hand producers on a silver platter the perfect edit. I mean, without my knowledge, right? I think you can attest to this too, Bridget. I am a very sassy communicator. I love to throw an eye roll out there. I am very much the person to say the sassy comment at the dinner table, but it's never at the expense of someone else. It is always, we're all in on the joke. In fact, there were times on Listen to Your Heart where I would actually say, one of the things that they used ad nauseum was my ding, ding, ding. And I remember actually saying those things, and there were moments where I would look straight to camera and I'd be like, use that, that was funny. Because I thought we were all in on the joke. I thought we were all like, this is funny. It's a reality TV show. We're all putting a show on. And so my mistake was believing that. And I think I'm not proud of everything that I said or did on the show, but I am able to contextualize. I was there for 10 days. This wasn't as serious or monumental as it's made to look on television. So that's true. But I am still filled with shame because I set myself up for this. I signed the contract. I gave this show permission to do whatever they wanted with my voice. They could Frankenbite me with the storyline. They could make it whatever they wanted it to be and how they produced it. So that is my mistake, is giving away that power.
All right. I'm glad you clarified that, because obviously from my seat, I see no mistakes. I think you are hilarious. I love the gifts of you that came out of this show. As your friend, I love that I can send those to your mom, and I still do. So personally, I think it was a great journey. I liked all the sassy sound bites you gave them that we can still use, like ding, ding, ding. So looking forward, back to the Monica Lewinsky of it all, her message and others like her. How do you find solace in what they say, and how are you now using this platform and others to use your message to help comfort others in a similar manner?
I think so few of us can relate to being a reality TV villain, right? Like, there's just not many out there. But I do believe that everyone can relate to feeling misrepresented, feeling humiliated, feeling like they did make a mistake and they don't know how to recover, and feeling like they were backstabbed and bullied. And those are all things that I feel like I walked through in this journey. And my hope with this podcast, and by finally sharing my story, is to reclaim my narrative and reclaim my voice and share from a place of empowerment instead of a place of despair. I think that's why it took me a few years to start talking about this publicly. I really was in despair for a number of years. I didn't know how to move forward. And I am definitely in a different place now. And I think I'm able to talk to others about their journeys and highlight the parts of their stories that will resonate with others and motivate them to make it through their own battle, whatever that is, whatever that looks like.
As I mentioned, you and I send each other interviews, articles, all the things to talk about over our 4 times daily chats. One of the things I sent you while discussing this was an interview with Colin Jost and Howard Stern, and he talked about his experience joining the news desk at SNL and how poorly it was received initially when he took over. And listening to that interview was the first time I was able to maybe understand where you were coming from a little bit better, because as much as I tried to logic with you from my seat, I truly couldn't comprehend what that shame felt like and manifested as. And he talked about how the negative reviews he received while doing that show, to the best of his ability, started to feel like a personal review of who he was. People weren't happy he was sitting in that seat, and it started to feel like he was a terrible person who had done something wrong. And I sent that to you because I thought that was interesting. And he talked a little bit about his journey, but I'd actually like to hear your version of how do you go from sitting in the seat feeling like this experience somehow turned you into a bad person who did something bad and question who you are and your worth, and turning that around to now where you have the confidence to speak out and share your story and know that you weren't doing anything blatantly wrong. You weren't being a bad human.
Yeah. I mean, that Colin Jost interview was so powerful for me to hear. So thank you for sending that to me. I think in the last year, I've been able to think of this as a journey from self-shame to self-respect. And by that, I mean, you are so bombarded by this hatred and this vitriol when you are a reality TV villain that you are overcome with shame and humiliation and self-hatred. I mean, I battled with self-hatred for so long after this experience. But when I think about anyone else, if I were to view somebody else going through the same thing, I would have so much respect for that person when they picked themselves up and dusted themselves off and decided to keep showing up. And it is so critical to our mental health, how we talk to ourselves. I think we all know and hear that often. And even more critical when you're going through a humiliating experience, like my edit, like Colin Jost's bad reviews, because it is so easy to confuse who you are with who other people are telling you you are. And it is a long healing process. It can be a long healing process, but it's so important to shift. It's a daily shift for me to go from self-shame to self-respect. No, I'm choosing to respect myself because I said, this isn't who I am. This is who I am. And I think we should all aim to have that respect for ourselves no matter what happens to us or the mistakes that we make.
And I think it's been great to watch you make that shift. Like you said, it was a years-long journey, and anyone, reality TV, public figure, or ordinary listener, can relate to the way you talk to yourself and how that impacts you, and that it isn't always positive and what it takes to turn that around. So I think that's something I'm excited to hear you continue talking about with your guests, as you talk about their journeys, what tips, tricks, turning points they experienced, and how you make it a part of your daily practice, because obviously you're opening yourself up again on a public forum. We know the internet isn't always the kindest, warmest place, and it's full of people who hide behind troll accounts. So I hope and challenge you to continue to share that publicly, even when it's not always a good day. If you say, this is what I read and this is how it made me feel, I'm sure someone listening will be able to hear that and relate to that, and hopefully you'll have a good reminder or a video to share with them as well.
Yeah. I think that's what I'm most looking forward to and I've already had a couple of interviews with my guests that have already blown me away, because I think it's so easy to forget when you look at someone who has achieved success on an outward or larger scale, to think that they too don't have that self-critical voice. But that self-criticism does not discriminate. And we can all learn on a daily basis how to overcome that. And I think sharing those reminders on A Deeper Look is something I'm really looking forward to.
I'm excited to see, as you said at the very beginning, your journalism degree come into play. You're a great interviewer. You clearly have lived a full life of experience in only 31 years. And You're an empathizer, sometimes almost to a fault. But I'm excited to see how that plays in you giving other people an opportunity to share on your platform, as well as continue to use this platform to advocate for the causes most important to you. Your guest list just keeps getting more impressive by the day. I know I send you my dream guests for you and you're already booking away. So I hope your listeners will comment with guests they'd like to hear from, but I know they're going to really enjoy the slate you have so far and the conversations you've been having.
Yeah, thank you. Speaking of dream guests, because I know you have a few, I have one in particular. So Monica Lewinsky, if you're out there and listening, please come on my podcast. I would love to talk to you because, as I said earlier, she really helped save me in one of the darkest times. So that's my personal dream interview. Yes, please comment and let me know. DM me your dream interview, and I'll see what I can do. And keep tuning in to A Deeper Look. Thank you for joining me, Bridge.
My pleasure.
If you are loving these conversations, please share with a friend or 5 and leave me a review because I would love to hear your feedback. And if you have an idea for a future guest, head on over to our Instagram @DeeperLookPod and comment who you'd like to get to know on a deeper level. New episodes drop every Wednesday. I'll see you next week on A Deeper Look.